Sean. Maybe, Sean, you could just introduce yourself, your name, where you're from, and then the topic that's of interest to you.
Absolutely. So my name is Sean Bellamy McNulty. I'm from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. A graduate of the University of British Columbia, the Sauder School of Business. And my question is with regards to federal spending. The average growth rate for nominal federal government debt is 7.41%, and the GDP growth rate is forecasted to be around 2 to 3%. So regardless of ideology, federal spending at some point in the future is going to have to be cut back. How will the eventual reduction in federal spending reduce America's competitiveness, if at all?
Tyler, Edward, which of you would like to take that on?
I could have a go if you like. I'm sure we should hear Tyler's views too, but you know, I think this depends entirely on how the cuts are made. As you point out, Sean, the cuts are clearly coming. Entitlement costs are entirely unsustainable. I think the report mentions that, is it 2037, the date that the entire federal government revenue, if it remains near its historic averages, will be consumed by the costs of just Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security alone. So clearly that's not going to happen. So somebody's going to have to do something before that moment arrives, and so those cuts are coming. Then also we have the cuts that are already underway, both as a result of the budget deal 2 years ago, and the sequester now. The cuts as they currently stand, particularly those last ones I mentioned, will affect America's competitiveness. They're very poorly designed, and that's one of the risks I highlight in the special report. You know, the cuts are falling disproportionately on the areas that we know bring the most benefit in terms of competitiveness, and in particular on investments in science and technology. And if you call up the big organizations that sort of handle most of the federal money that goes into scientific or medical research, they're beside themselves at the moment. They're seeing their budgets cut by around 10% for the next decade, and they're horrified by that, and I think probably rightly so. On the other hand, everybody agrees, at least theoretically, that the cuts as they're currently designed are terrible cuts. Right? So hopefully they won't last for 10 years in their current form. Some kind of budget deal will be done, and the cuts will fall in places that will actually help to improve America's competitiveness. I mean, clearly one of the things that is a drag on America's competitiveness is the government debt, the risks to the economy that brings, the crowding out of productive investment by unproductive spending by the government. So if a more rational way can be found to cut the budget, I think that would actually help to improve America's competitiveness.
If I could just follow up just quickly, if you're going to pick just one thing to cut, Edward, I'm just curious, what would it be, like your number one cut in federal spending? Is there anything particular you think where there's an opportunity there?
It's not so much that there's an opportunity. I mean, yes, I would pick Medicare, and because Medicare is the problem. Right? I mean, you know, the Social Security is apart from the payroll tax holiday or this tax break that Americans have enjoyed for the last couple of years, ceased to enjoy on the 1st of January. But if it weren't for that, Social Security would still be covering its costs, and it's going to need reform. But it's at least at the moment, you know, more or less under control. Medicare is entirely out of control, and as Tyler indicated, America spends this huge amount of money on healthcare and doesn't really achieve, in fact, doesn't achieve better results than many other countries. So clearly there's room to save money there, but also that's where the cuts are going to have to fall, because that's where the spending is unsustainable.
I see.
Tyler, your thoughts?
You asked for one single cut. I would start with farm subsidies, eliminate them. We have a lot of room to cut defense spending. We absolutely should then cut Medicare. And also there's room to raise taxes in this country. So our fiscal problems are at least potentially solvable. That doesn't mean we'll do a good job solving them. You know, people worry a lot about the cuts to discretionary spending and the sequester, and I do think a lot of those are a mistake. But we also need to put them in perspective. A lot of those are cuts to baseline growth, and they're not absolute cuts. And if you look at something like research, in most cases it's cutting back to, say, the level in 2006, which again, it strikes me that's going in the wrong direction. But people speak of it as if it's the end of the world and the United States will never invent anything ever again. And keep in mind our period of greatest inventiveness of 19th century, there wasn't really much government funding for scientific research at all. So again, I don't favor all those cuts, but they're not the end of the world. We will manage them one way or another, and we need to go after Medicare defense and just zero out farm subsidies.
I see. Excellent. Well, thank you for answering my questions, Tyler, Mark, and Edward. It's been great to be a part of the discussion.
Do you have strong opinions, Sean? What would you cut?
If I was going to cut it back to or focus on one particular issue, I would say retirement age. It seems like not only in the U.S. but also in Europe, if you look at when Social Security and these programs were enacted, the Social Security kicked in at 65, and the average lifespan is about 61, 62, and that hasn't adjusted. And you meet a lot of 65-year-olds today. I mean, they're in great shape, right? And I mean, I don't know if they're going to like to hear this, but I mean, I think potentially they could be working. You could see if you were to raise the retirement age, 70, 71, 72, maybe have it vary per occupation. I think in that one reform could probably solve most of the fiscal problems around the world.
Sean, thank you very much. Let's move on. Let's